What is going on, everybody? Sean Daniel with Guitar Control here, and today we're going to show some love to acoustic blues and talk a little bit about what makes certain chords bluesy, and then how to kind of take the intervals, the space between notes, to kind of recreate a bluesy sound in really any kind of situation, specifically for an acoustic guitar. So make sure to click the link below because I'm going to tab out the chords and the single notes that we're going to use to kind of demonstrate this, and we're going to do this all in the bluesiest key, the people's key, the key of G, which means G major, all right? So the thing about the blues and what makes the blues is that specifically the minor pentatonic scale played over major chords. And that's kind of like a simplified way to describe it, but what I mean is this. Like, let's say we have a G major chord, all right? Now, that's gonna be the blues in G if we start here, but just playing like chords like G major to C major to D major isn't really bluesy in and of itself. The thing that kind of makes a lot of these acoustic songs bluesy is by adding a minor scale interval into it, specifically a minor 7 or a flat 7. Now what that means is if we have the key of G, right? Here's a G major chord. The major scale that goes with it looks like this. So it's gonna be the first thing on the tab is just the G major scale. This is 7 different notes, and the first one again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 and 8 are the same thing. 3E, 5E, 2A, 3A, 5A, 2D, 4D, 5D, okay? Now, we're gonna make one alteration to this scale, and that's take the 7th note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we're gonna flatten it, okay? So, this note, which is an F sharp, we're gonna make into an F note. 4th fret on the D string to the 3rd fret on the D string, okay? So, now, we can actually turn this into a chord by taking the notes that make up a G major chord, which is G, B, and D, the 1st note, the 3rd note, and the 5th note in that scale. And we're gonna add that 7th note. And we get a G7 chord, a G dominant 7 chord. So, we're taking a minor interval. Now, the reason this is called a minor interval is because if we take the G minor scale, which looks like this isn't really so much a lesson on the minor scale, but it's always good to know. The G minor scale would be 3, 5, 6, 3, 5, 6, 3, 5. The 7th note in that scale is what we're adding to a major chord. So, we're taking a little bit of minorness, sprinkling it on top of a major chord, and that is kind of a signature sound of the blues. And aside from that, we can do that to any of the major chords in a blues progression. Blues progression is usually some combination of a 1, a 4, and a 5. So again, in the key of G, 1 is G, 2 is A, 3 is B, 4 is C. So a lot of times a 1 to a 4 in the key of G will be a G to a C major. The 1, 4, and the 5th notes, which is a D, right? So G, C, and D all become major chords. G, C, D. Again, it kind of sounds like the structure of a lot of blues songs, but doesn't really sound bluesy. It's only until we add that flat 7, that minor 7, that a progression like that is gonna sound a little bluesier. So for example, I'm just gonna play the same kind of thing, first as major chords, then as dominant 7 chords with that flat 7 added. So we got G major to C major, G major to D major, back to G. If I add that interval to every one of those chords, I get G7, D7. So, as far as like the rules of staying in a key apply, we're actually using notes that aren't even in the key of G to add to a lot of these chords, but we're getting something that sounds kind of familiar, and that's because this is really kind of the backbone of a lot of blues music. So anytime you see a major chord, add that interval to it, and you're always safe, you're in the clear, okay? Now, the cool thing is to maybe kind of identify this interval. Again, interval is just a space between two notes. Fancy music word, don't worry about it, you're gonna be fine. Space between two notes, be able to identify it off of a root note, okay? So what I mean by that is anytime you have a root note, so maybe like the 3rd fret on the low E string, which is a G, you can always find it by just skipping a string, same fret on a different string, okay? Now, you can do this really over any major chord of the blues or any minor chord, just specifically anywhere, right? Kind of like we talked about at the very beginning with the G minor scale, how that interval really works, no matter what type of genre you're working in. So let's talk about the other chords in the key of G that become minor chords. Specifically, those would be the second, third, and sixth notes in the key of G. So going back to that G major scale thing where all of this comes from, everything comes from the major scale. That's why it's super important to learn and understand. The second note in the key of G is A. So A minor will sound good in this key. The third note is a B. B minor will sound good in this key. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The sixth note is E. E minor also sounds good in this key. So we can add that note to an A, a B, or an E. When we track that along the low E string, the A is the 5th fret. That interval is going to be the 5th fret on the D string. The 7th fret is a B. Again, that's another minor chord. That interval is also going to exist. And then the 12th fret is an E. Like an E minor chord, also open. So you can kind of start adding these little pieces of chords into whatever it is you're playing. You can kind of make turnarounds out of them. Really, anything with a minor 7 is kind of fair game in the blues, which is almost kind of like what makes it so bluesy sounding. It's a signature of the blues. So even if you wanted to add stuff in between those chords that we did before, like a G7 to a C7 to a D7. Okay, now, it sounds kind of dark because there's a lot of minorness going in there, but maybe that's something you're going for, right? It's all about tracking and then ending up at home. Most blues songs end up at home, which is always the one chord, right? So all of this comes from making chords out of the major scale. Something super important I try to stress all the time in a lot of these different videos, so make sure you do this. Now, this is totally movable, so what I mean by that, we can do this in absolutely any key. Everything that we just talked about pertains no matter where your root note starts. Let's do it in the key of A, okay? So, A is the 5th fret on the low E string. Make the exact same chords in the key of A by looking at the major scale here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And again, there's that flat 7 that makes an A7. Really quick, just kind of a disclaimer, is this 3-note chord that we've been using, that I charted out in the tab too, which is just like, let's say, 5E, 4A, 5D. We're using this as an A7 chord, when technically we don't have the 5th in it, so there are different versions of an A7 chord that might sound more full on an acoustic guitar, but this is just kind of like a really cool little voicing that is super easy to make just by adding that 7, all right? So we can do the same thing with the 1 chord in the key of A, which is A. We can go to the 4 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is D. And now the 5 chord, which is an E, okay? So we have A7, D7, E7. Now, you're definitely not chained to any of these specific voicings that you do. If you know other voicings for A7, E7, and D7, that's great. A lot of people like this E7 and this D7 to go with this A7. But the one thing that they have in common is that interval of a minor 7, okay? Now, just like before, we can add the minor chords to it if we want, specifically that little kind of turnaround run that we did right there. It's always going to be on the 2nd note of the major scale, which is a B. So B minor is a chord that works in A, specifically that minor 7 right there. The 3rd note in the key of A is a C sharp. That would be the 9th fret on the low E string. Okay, so I'm just kind of going from the 3 chord, which is how musicians communicate. A lot of times they, instead of saying like, oh, go to like a C sharp minor, to a B minor, to an A7. They'll be like, all right, we're in the key of A, give me a 3, 2, 1, and that's what that means. Okay, so it's really good to start thinking maybe in numbers and how they relate to a parent scale of a key, right? And that's true across all genres, not just blues. It's really, in my experience, an easier way for musicians to communicate by just saying like, oh, give me like a 1, 4, 5 in a key, instead of being like, okay, give me like a C major or a D minor or whatever. It's good to know both ways, for sure, but definitely something that you might want to just give a little bit of thought to and a little bit of practice time to, because it makes remembering songs a lot easier. and I think it's just a better, more useful way to kind of navigate through the fretboard. So again, any of these frets and locations will work. Key of B right here. I'm just root noting on the 7th fret, whatever that is, it's a B. I don't even have to know what the 1, 4, and 5 chords are in this key. I know they're gonna happen here, here, and here. So, anytime you get a chance to use a flat 7, a minor 7, dominant 7 interval, just kind of different names that are really talking about the same thing, and you're going for a bluesy sound, grasp at it, because that is such a cool bluesy thing to do and something that makes it really unique compared to other musical genres. All right, minor 7 over major chords. So hopefully this was a little bit helpful to you. If you have any questions or feedback, hit us up in the comments. Again, make sure to download the tab so you don't forget the different voicings and kind of fingerings that we used for a lot of these things. And also definitely check out some of these other videos that we have on the Guitar Control channel from myself, other guitar instructors, etc. A lot of stuff that goes a little bit deeper into the blues and other genres and just like song lessons specifically too. And definitely don't be afraid to let us know some stuff that you might want to see more of so we can get working on giving the people what they want and providing that great content that the Guitar Control channel is known for. So let us know what you think, and hopefully I'll talk to you all soon. Thanks a lot.